Hidden Gems, Episode 12, Revolvers, Resistors, and Rings. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Jason. And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
Oh, missing Jason today.
Yes.
I guess this is your first time experiencing a two-person episode. It definitely does feel a lot different, but I am sure that he is having a blast up in Maine.
Yeah, hopefully it's a little less humid up in the Northeast than it has been here this week. It's been crazy here in North Carolina.
I hope so. I'll tell you, when we were there a few weeks ago, that was in the middle of that heat wave up in the Boston, New England area. It was like 95 degrees in Maine.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very, very hot. So hopefully it's a little bit more cool, but I'm sure they're having a blast. It's one of the best trips that our family has ever taken.
Cool.
We really enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, of course, look forward to hearing from Jason when he gets back. Well, what have you been up to lately, Chris?
Yeah, it's been a pretty fun and eventful 2 weeks from a nerdy standpoint outside of board games. You all know how I love to report back to the group on things that I'm into and really been enjoying lately. And I actually have two things I'm going to talk about. Since Jason's not here, I'm going to take one of his banter segment times and talk a little bit about some stuff I've been into. So one is a TV show, and one is a video game.
Okay.
All right, so I'll start with the TV show. The show I've really been enjoying lately is a show called Black Summer. Have you heard of this show?
I haven't.
Okay. This is a show, it's on Netflix, if you're interested in checking it out. And it's currently in its second season. Now, stay with me here, okay? This is a zombie show, okay?
Okay. The odds of me watching this show just went down like to really a small number.
Yeah, Casey's probably not going to
Right.
Okay, all right. It's a zombie show. And to be clear, I totally get zombie shows have been done absolutely to death. Sure. Not just TV shows, but movies, video games. Yeah. The Walking Dead really ushered in a zombie craze.
Right.
And 10 years ago, it was cool. Right? Now it's just kind of lame. Because it's been so overdone, right? Yeah. So much so that I almost didn't give this show a chance.
Okay.
But I'm glad that I did, because I really like it. And in fact, it's my favorite zombie show.
Wow. So it's like a whole new take, even different than Walking Dead?
It is.
Okay.
So I'll tell you why. In this particular show, the zombies are fast zombies. Most zombies are slow, not very exciting. These are the fast ones. Okay. They run, and they like scream, like in a rage.
Yeah.
Which is not unique. 28 Days Later does that. There's World War Z.
I was going to say, yeah, I think that one they were fast.
Yes. So it's that kind of zombie.
Okay.
But what's really cool about this show, and why I think it's worth checking out, is the way they do the storytelling in this show is really cool.
Okay.
Every episode is broken up into many chapters. And a chapter can be anywhere from like 30 to 45 seconds up to like 5 to maybe even as long as 10 minutes.
Of actual story time.
For that chapter. So every chapter, it'll go to a black screen and it'll give a 1 or 2 word title. It'll say The Lodge. And then it'll go to the lodge or wherever, and something will happen there. And so you're following these characters around, and these things are happening to them. And then what's so cool about it is, so let's say that a guy gets attacked and he gets taken down, chewed up by zombies or something.
Okay.
Then it'll go to the next chapter, and then in that chapter, it'll switch to a different character who may or may not have been in that same area. And in the background, you will see that person that you were just watching get attacked.
Oh, wow.
So it's switching between different points of view in the same scene. Between chapters. You're like, oh yeah, I was just watching that guy.
Right.
And you can see him in the background.
So it's overlapping the timelines a little bit.
Right.
Okay.
And so you're seeing the same event from many different points of view and perspectives. And you learn things depending on who you're following. It's so cool.
Wow.
It is so cool. Like I said, it takes
sounds fascinating.
It takes the zombie genre, which is almost dead now, and I would say it's worth checking out.
Dead? You're saying that it revives it.
It revives the genre. You're not going to feel uplifted watching the show. I'm not even... It's not one that's going to fill you with any kind of hope.
Okay.
But I gravitate towards shows like that. And if a zombie apocalypse were ever to happen, this show, in my mind, comes as close to what it would actually be like if it happened.
Okay.
You know, The Walking Dead started that way, and it got a little too crazy for me.
Yeah.
You know, it got a little bit too unrealistic and unbelievable. You have 2 or 3 people mowing down 100 zombies. You know, it just got a little silly.
Right.
This one is filled with despair. And it's bleak.
Okay.
And don't get attached to anybody because people are dying right and left. Okay. But it keeps you engaged. I was totally into this show.
How many episodes is the first season?
So I think both seasons are like 8 episodes long or so. I will also say quickly, I think the second season is much better than the first one.
Wow.
There are a couple of episodes in the middle of season 1 that are a little bit weird, but the second season is some of the best TV I've watched all year.
Wow. So they kind of caught their stride.
Yeah, for sure. I hope it gets picked up for a third season. I think it's awesome.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah. Check it out. Black Summer, Netflix. It's cool.
Okay, so you said you had a TV show and a video game. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the video game.
Yeah, so keeping in the theme with the undead, I've been playing a video game called Breakfast Battle. Okay? I'm going to say that again. Breakfast Battle. Like Exorcist, but breakfast.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? Are you familiar with the game Breakout from Atari?
I'm not.
You've played it.
It might ring a bell if I saw it, yeah.
So it's the game where you've got the little bar or the paddle going across the bottom of the screen and it's knocking the ball into the blocks.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's Breakout.
Okay.
So Breakfast Battle is a take on Breakout. What you're doing is the blocks are waffles and other breakfast items that are possessed by demon spirits, okay?
Okay.
And so when you hit these waffle blocks with the ball, you're exorcising their demons. So the waffles are breaking and these little cartoony spirits fly out of them.
Okay.
Okay. Did I mention this was a hidden gem video game? It very much so is, okay? Very obscure, as you can imagine. But it's fun and addictive. It's a quick play. It's not anything you're going to get super invested in like Final Fantasy VII or anything like that. But just to sit down and play, it's satisfying. You're basically just trying to get as far as you can.
Okay.
You're breaking the blocks, but as you break the egg blocks, you get these power-ups. So you get the bacon laser. Because, you know, why would you not want to play with the bacon laser, right? So your bar starts shooting bacon strips out of it and breaking blocks that way. It's just very addicting. Not to mention, you can play cooperatively.
Okay.
And you can play competitively, where you're trying to outlast your competitor.
Tetris style?
Like Tetris style. Or like Dr. Mario.
Okay.
And so you can do things where you negatively impact your opponents. Like you can flip their screen upside down, where their bar is on top. Crazy. Crazy fun.
What are you playing this on? Like your phone or
it's on the Switch.
System? Switch.
It was like $10. Very fun. Kids love it too.
Okay.
Breakfast Battle. Check it out. Hidden Gem video game. Well, that's it for me.
All right. So, yeah, one of the things that we like to do is occasionally just talk about other aspects of making this show. And this week we wanted to talk a little bit about how we produce the show and the post-production side of things, particularly. And this has been kind of my domain since we started. In fact, before we even started, I was like, I'll do it. Flavor text. I'll read the flavor text. This has to be a part of the show if you want me involved. And honestly, it really has been the most fun job that I've had. I don't typically teach games. I don't typically find the games. I haven't really been leading the mining effort, but I own the flavor text.
Yep. And you do it well. Very well.
Thank you. Yeah, so we were going to talk a little bit about how we go about doing that and what that process looks like for us. And really, I have to be honest to the audience, many times it's off the cuff. A lot of times I'm texting you right before, like, hey, I need a screenshot of the flavor text so I can like think about it. Sometimes I know I'm going to try to do a voice or not, and I try to actually practice this. Casey very generously listens to me sit there and practice voices sometimes. That's only been a couple of times that I've done it, and a lot of the times the voices have been completely off the cuff.
I'm pretty sure last episode in Niagara,
we just made it up.
You just started, and we're like, dude, just go for it. It's great.
I
was making like a moment of inspiration.
I was making a joke about the person giving the instructions was like a raft guide, and I was like, yeah, what if he sounded like this? It was just stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So sometimes it's pre-planned, sometimes it's off the cuff, and it adds, even for us, a lot of fun to the podcast. And I feel like it has a positive impact on our audience as well.
Got to make it fun. It's all about having fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, in the editing process, we have a couple of resources that we use for royalty-free music and Creative Commons. So anyone out there who's also any type of a podcast creator or YouTuber or something like that, you know that you have to have royalty-free and Creative Commons licenses to use music. Music is not free if you're going to release something into the public that is your property. So we have a couple of resources that we draw from to find something suitable that will work for these brief segments. But we had a couple of occasions so far where we really wanted to have something unique, something that was like purely ours.
The hidden gems flair.
Exactly. So one of the things that I wanted to do this week is actually highlight our other resource that no one else gets to have, which is my brother, Travis Lockey, who has on numerous occasions written us custom original music specifically and solely for Hidden Gems. So Travis Lockey is a musician. He's a music creator. And if you pay close attention to the show notes, you might actually remember seeing his name listed in our music credits. And we've got his latest contribution to the podcast coming up in this episode, so stay tuned for that in our third game review of this episode. He's been helping out since episode 3, where he contributed the themes for Money.
Yes, he did.
And Spectaculum.
Two of my favorites, honestly.
Yes, two of the most memorable, and those were the ones I think that where we really began to feel inspired. We just had these ideas for like, what if the Money like sounded like this like 1940s, radio announcer or whatever. And I had this idea of, because Spectaculum is this carnival
three-ring circus
theme, and I was like, let's do the Ringmaster. And of course, that's near and dear to my heart because my first D&D character was an aspiring circus ringleader.
That's right.
So we got to bring those elements in there, and he just like cranked those out for us.
I had that Spectaculum circus theme song in my head for days after I heard it. It's so catchy. He killed that one.
Yeah, he absolutely crushed it. And so that kind of inspired us to be like, well, maybe Travis would want to work with us a little bit more. And he has. And so some other episodes that he contributed to are Ivor's Jig, which is from our Ivor the Engine review. Forward from our Medina review, which is actually an Earendel track, which I'll elaborate on what Earendel is in a minute. And then Secondhand Money from our Bargain Hunter review, which was our parody of Macklemore's beat to Thrift Shop. And then Gates of Stone from Dwarves Inc. We really wanted to go with this dwarf sort of lament theme, kind of like in The Hobbit, that sort of thing. And he did just a great job just kind of like channeling that feel for like the dwarves longing for their minds and that sort of thing. And so, so I mentioned Earendel. So Travis writes music under his artist name, Earendel, which those Lord of the Rings nerds like us out there might recognize if you're one of the people that actually read the Silmarillion. He has a whole background. It's not actually purely taken from the Silmarillion, but there is sort of a tangential reference there that goes really deep into Tolkien's background and old English stuff, which Travis is also super into and very well versed in. So he's been working on this project for quite a while now, and his stuff is in a whole different category for what he does for us at Hidden Gems, and it's amazing stuff. He calls the genre instrumental chill, and most of it's very laid back. It's got subtle grooves, optimistic sounding music. Forward is a great example if you listen to that Medina review track, and it's all available on YouTube and SoundCloud. So we're going to put links to his YouTube and his SoundCloud in the show notes if you want to check out more of his stuff. So mainly I just wanted to highlight his contributions.
Definitely.
Travis, thank you so much. We love what you're doing. We love what you did for this episode, and we can't wait for what we're going to come up with in the future working with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Travis. It's so cool to see how the podcast is growing, and we're just 12 episodes in, and to have Travis kind of on staff. I mean, he works for us now, producing music for us, and as we mentioned, we've got Ghidorah helping us out on the guild on a volunteer basis, but still helping us. Just seeing the community grow is just an awesome thing. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And when you feel like you can really craft something, you're not just reaching out to a free resource like a clip art, right? It's like we're not just taking something that someone else made and like applying it to our purposes, which we don't mind doing. But when you feel like you can say, hey, Travis, we want to do something like this. Here's the game. Here's some background information on it. We would love for it to sound like this. And that he and I get to have these musical conversations, which he and I have both been
doing, creating music since we were teenagers.
Yeah.
And so now it's fun to continue to be able to collaborate on making awesome music even into our 30s. We've got families and stuff like that. Travis still has the bandwidth and the creativity to create awesome and beautiful stuff for us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you, Travis.
Cool. So I guess we, as usual, always have a cocktail. You want to tell us about the cocktail that we're going to enjoy this week?
Yeah, absolutely. So it may not have been totally clear from the title, but this week, obviously, we're talking about 2-player games because Jason's away. And one of those 2-player games is a Lord of the Rings game. Actually, Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation. That's the ring part of the title. Mm-hmm. And so I thought I would do a Lord of the Rings themed cocktail because Cameron and I love us some Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yes.
And so it's just a good opportunity to do one of those. It's our first time reviewing a Lord of the Rings themed game. So I decided to do a cocktail by the name of Sting.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a super simple cocktail, but it's a very thematic one because you'll recall that Sting will glow a blue color when orcs are around. And in this particular cocktail, it says that it'll glow blue when thirst is around. So that's what it says on the website. All right. So very simple. It's 1 ounce of vodka, 1 ounce of blue curacao, and that's what gives the drink that blue color. If you ever feel like you want to try to give a drink a blue color, you use blue curacao. That's how they do it.
Right,
a lot of poolside drinks and a lot of beachy drinks, tiki drinks, often have a blue color, and it's because it has blue curacao in it. And it's basically just orange liqueur, like a triple sec or a Cointreau or whatever, but it just gives you that blue color. And then you top that with lemonade and serve with ice.
Yeah.
Very straightforward drink. It basically tastes like an alcoholic lemonade, honestly.
It's not exactly the color of the blue curacao because I guess the lemonade's like a little bit yellow, so it's just barely a touch greenish, which is exactly what Bilbo's sword looks like when it glows.
It looks very similar. It's a very clever idea.
It's very fun.
Yeah, and pretty tasty too. I like it.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about 2-player games. As you'll recall, if you've been following the podcast for a while now, we've already done a 2-player game episode, and that's when Cameron was away in Hawaii on his honeymoon vacation with Casey.
Yep.
And now it's Cameron and I talking about 2-player games. So back when Jason and I did it, we talked about our feelings on 2-player games and how we enjoyed them. You can listen to that episode to hear my thoughts on that. But I just wanted to kick it to Cameron to give him an opportunity just to give his thoughts on 2-player games in general. How do you feel about them? Do you like them? What do you not like about them? Do you seek to play them? What are your thoughts on 2-player games?
I was thinking about this. Of course, we get a lot of opportunities to play group games. 3 to 5 players usually. And I obviously really enjoy that, but I have one of the types of personalities that loves smaller and smaller groups. And so I find that I actually quite enjoy 2-player games. I enjoyed preparing for this episode and having a chance to kind of get some one-on-one time with one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And really, I feel like that's where 2-player games just really thrive.
Yeah.
Right? Particularly when you have the chance to play a game with someone that you know really well, where it's competitive, but it's laid back.
Yeah.
And so for me, I mean, obviously you and I have gotten to play some games, but I play a lot of 2-player games with Casey. Our first date, we played Hanabi, 2-player. Hanabi's not strictly a 2-player game, but it does perform really well as a 2-player game.
It's best at 2, I think.
And that was actually one of the things that I sort of realized, I can play games with this person. It showed me something about who Casey is. So obviously they hold a very personal place in my heart. Casey and I have played a ton of Dominion 2-player. I've played more 2-player Dominion than any other format.
I'm scared to play you two now.
Yeah, I'm scared to play Casey now.
Destroy us.
Yeah, we started playing a lot more online during the pandemic. If there are Dominion players out there and you haven't discovered the online Dominion, just do it. It's dominion.games. We're not sponsored by their website, but I would happily encourage anyone to go and spend money there. So there are games, I think, like those that just perform really, really well and are quite fun to play, particularly with someone that you know really well. I think another aspect of 2-player games that I think goes really well is when they're cooperative games.
Yeah.
I think some people struggle with the adversarial aspect, especially maybe when it's a spouse or a loved one.
And they can be adversarial by their very nature. This is something that Jason and I brought up, and one of the reasons that I don't gravitate towards 2-player games very strongly is because I get so emotionally invested in the game.
Well, and I think that's why if you can find cooperative 2-player games, then you have a chance to not be adversarial.
Right.
You can put your heads together, you can lose a game and just be like, you want to try it again?
Yeah.
All right, let's try it again. And you start over. I love it when you have a chance to do that with a game. So I think cooperative 2-player games are a great combination.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts on 2-player games, Cameron.
Yeah. You ready to get into the games?
Yeah, let's do it.
The year is 1892. The bank at Repentant Springs has been robbed. Many good citizens, including Sheriff Anton Dreyfus and schoolmarm Sue Daggett, were brutally slain as the gang shot its way, whooping and hollering, out of town. Colonel Ned McCready and his men are tasked with bringing Jack Colty, a man so mean he'd steal a fly from a blind spider or a coin off a dead man's eyes, and his gang to justice.
Revolver, published in 2011 by Stronghold and White Goblin Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1,975. Designer of this game is Mark Chaplin. I had not heard of this guy. I looked him up on BGG, and he doesn't have any other really notable designs. This is his best design by far. He has a few others, but they're really far down in the rankings. I picked this game up on a whim. Mm-hmm. I had not heard of this game from anybody, but back in the day, back when I was in my obsessive buying phase in the board game hobby, when it was all new and I was excited, I used to get on Cool Stuff Inc. way more than I should. And Cool Stuff does a daily sale, and they often run some really good sales on games. And in this particular game, they were selling the base game and its numerous expansions, all as a bundle. Okay? At dirt cheap. I mean, insanely cheap. So cheap that I just bought it sight unseen because I was getting so much game, basically.
Yeah.
So that's how I acquired it. But I didn't really know much about this game when I got it. Okay? Brief rule summary of Revolver. So Revolver is a 2-player dueling card game where one player is going to be taking control of a deck of cards that represents the Colty gang, and another player is going to be taking a deck of cards that represents Colonel Ned McCready, trying to bring the Colty gang to justice. What the Colty gang player is trying to do is he is trying to board and escape on the 315 Express, which is a train that is running at the very end of the game. If the Colty gang player can at least have one member of his gang survive all the way to the end of the game and board the train, he wins the game that way. There is one other victory condition that he has, is if he is able to clear red cubes off of the Mexican border card, which basically represents him fleeing across the Mexican border. He can also win that way, and he clears a cube every time he avoids losing a gang member at the end of each round of play. On the flip side of that, Colonel Ned McCready, his goal is to kill the Colty gang. If he is able to eliminate every member of the Colty gang, of which there are 16 members, he will win the game. So at the beginning of the game, all of the gang members are going to be positioned in front of the Colty gang player, and if Ned McCready is able to kill them all before that last round on the 315 Express, he's victorious. Alright, so the way the game is played is pretty straightforward. In the center of the table are 5 cards. These are 5 different locations where these duels or these battles are going to be taking place. So for example, one of them might be in a canyon, and another one might be at a saloon. On each card is a certain number of rounds, and while you're at that location, you can play cards to that location to either kill the Colty gang or not be killed by Ned McCready. So on a player's turn, what they're going to do, always starting with the Colty gang, is they're going to draw 2 cards, and then they're going to play cards to that location. Some cards are free to play to a location, but other cards require a cost, and that's a discard cost. So for example, you might need to discard 2 cards out of your hand to play a certain card to that certain location. When you're playing cards to a location, most of the cards contribute firepower, but some cards let you do actions that can have various effects on the gameplay. After the Colty gang player is played, the McCready player will now take his turn, and he functions much the same way. Plays cards to the location, paying discard costs if applicable. Now, one thing that's important to note, the Colty gang player can at most have 3 cards played to a location, while the McCready player can have as many cards at a location as he wants. Once all those cards are played down, you compare firepowers. If the Colty gang has the most firepower, he doesn't lose a gang member. If the McCready player has the most firepower, he kills a gang member. Play will continue on like that, moving from location to location until the specified number of rounds have been played. If the culty gang's still alive, they win. If they're eliminated, they lose. That's generally how you play Revolver. So, as I mentioned, Revolver is a very asymmetrical two-player game. Each player's deck is unique. The culty gang's deck does not look like the McCready deck, and they have different win objectives. How did you feel like the game did balancing that? Did they feel balanced? Did one deck feel stronger than the other? What were your thoughts on that? Did it feel like a fair fight?
Yeah, I do think that the game is balanced, even though things like the decks are not balanced. So, for example, Ned McCready's deck does not have the same firepower as the culty gang. It just doesn't. However, the limitations that the culty gang has in terms of the number of cards that you can have out is counterbalanced by the fact that Ned McCready's group, you can just keep playing cards. If you have them in your hand, or if you have cards that can help you get more cards to get cards in your hand, you can just keep playing cards to that location in order to make up the difference so that you come on top. And the fact that the Ned McCready group plays after the culty gang. So what they've done is they've counterweighted the rules with an imbalance to the deck. It's kind of genius.
It is.
When you play this game a couple times and you're like, it just works out that way to where it's still really tight.
Yeah, I think this game does something in games that I really like, and that's the phenomenon of when you're playing on a certain side, you feel like the other side is too powerful.
Yes.
And then you play the other side, and you're like, no, they're too powerful. You know, like, you always feel like the other side is stronger.
Yeah.
When in actuality, I think it is balanced. But like you said, the fact that Ned McCready gets to go last is such a powerful position, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't explain this very well in the rules, but again, once all the cards are played for a round, you compare those strengths, and if McCready is larger, he kills a gang member, right?
Yeah. The gang doesn't get another turn to play more cards or anything.
Not until it moves to the next round, right? So McCready always knows what he has to play down to win. And you might think, well, that just seems super overpowered. But if you play a lot of cards down to a location, the culty gang has cards that can just obliterate.
Yeah.
Cards that have been played.
Pop.
Yeah.
And then they've got the cards you just placed down are gone.
Yeah, and that can be crushing when you have a big force down and they just get wiped out. And then you're short stacked for the next round or even maybe the next location, right? So you've committed a lot of cards. They just got blown up, and now you're like, oh, crap, now what do I do, right?
If you're McCready, you don't really feel safe playing all those extra dudes down just because you can.
Yeah, the culty gang has a lot of cards that's like, two of your guys just die.
Yep.
It feels scary on both sides.
Mm-hmm. So another thing I enjoyed about this game, I liked how the border tokens and the round markers at the different locations are meant to represent time. It's such an important aspect of this game, right? When you're chipping away at those south of the border markers, you can just see this gang getting closer and closer to being out of your jurisdiction if you're McCready.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention, there are cards in each player's deck that can speed up or slow down the passage of time.
Right.
So if you're a culty gang, you're trying to get through this game as fast as possible, right? You just want to make it to the end. And you have cards that will allow you to move the round marker ahead while McCready's trying to pull it back, right? Every card is helpful, and that's a helpful one. But there are other cards that might be more helpful in the moment. And that's another thing I really liked about this game, is that in order to pay for some cards, especially powerful cards,
painful,
you have to discard other cards out of your hand. And they're all good. For the most part.
For the most part.
There are a couple of crappy pistols in there, but most of them, inevitably, you're going to have these decisions of, do I discard this card so I can play this card that will help me now, or do I hold this card that might really help me later, but it's not a guarantee, right? So, for example, there's a culty gang card, kill Ned McCready. Just kill him. In the right moment, situationally, that can be incredibly strong. However, Ned McCready may never get drawn by your opponent.
Could be at the bottom of the deck.
It just might not come up. You're not going to use your entire deck. So is it worth it to hold that card in the hopes that you might be able to use it later? Or do I just discard it now and get the effect that I want right now, right? It's a good decision.
The culty gang's deck has all these guns, right? Whereas on the other side, Ned McCready's deck, it has people. It doesn't have guns.
It's deputies.
But one of the things about that is, I think it's the deputy card. It's only a power of 1. but it lets you play it and draw another card. And like the card draw in this game is pretty limited. You only draw 2 cards at the beginning of your turn. Right. So being able to draw another card and keep playing and not being dwindling down to 2 or 1 cards, because that ends up being information to your opponent. Right, I don't know how many times of the games that we played playing as either side where it was like, how many cards do you have?
Right.
Because it's like, if I do this, are you going to be able to come back and like slap me later? So I thought that was an interesting element as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to note there's no hand limit in this game.
Right.
Okay. So you can stockpile up on cards. Yep. And I think that's important, right? Because I think another big part of this game is when that decision, do I play a card now or do I hold it? It might be worth it to give up a round or even a location and prepare for the next location, right?
Yeah.
Really build up that hand of cards to try to be successful later. This game really ultimately is a game of picking your battles, especially if you're the Culty Gang player.
Yeah.
Because if you're the Culty Gang player, you're going to lose most of the battles. That should be expected because Ned McCready has to kill 16 people.
Right.
And there's usually, depending on how cards are played, around like 20 to 22 rounds. So he's going to win most of the time. But as the Culty player, if you can turn the tide just a few times, it might be enough for you just to barely squeak out a win and survive, right?
Yeah.
Really just trying to decide, do I play these cards now or do I just let this go and try to prepare for the next one? Because I didn't mention that some of the locations give the Culty Gang a bonus to their firepower. Like the Canyon. You can imagine he's ambushing Ned McCready and they're shooting down at him in the ravine or whatever. So it's really a game of picking your battles.
Sure. And that leads to the last pro that I wanted to throw out there, which is they just crushed the theme on this game. This game feels just thoroughly Wild West, good guys, bad guys, white hat, black hat, like all of that through and through. You feel the tension between the two groups. The flavor on the cards is I think, really well done. Yeah. The art, I think they did a good job with that. You know, they pull in all the different types of characters that you might find in a Western, the well-armed bar girl and all of this sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed the cards, and there are a lot of them. Like, if you thumb through each of the decks, it's not a lot of duplicates. There are some pistols and such that duplicate, but a lot of them are unique cards, and they're all very thematic. Yeah. They all make sense. They all have a good feel to them. I agree. They were fun to play. Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a lot of things that we did like about the game. Anything that we didn't think was as great?
Yeah, so we've been talking about card draw. This is a 2-player card game, right? I don't know if I would consider this a con as more of, I would consider it a risk. You just run the risk of this happening in these kinds of 2-player dueling head-to-head card games is that your opponent might just draw the perfect combination of cards and you are not going to have an answer. Yeah. Now, I think that's rare, but it can happen, and I know it can happen because it happened to us. Yeah. So in the very first game we played of this, at the very first location, I drew the Sandstorm and the Jackson Clan, which the Jackson Clan is the strongest card in the Culty game.
5 power.
Yep. And the Sandstorm limits the number of cards you can play at a location. Right. And I just kept looking at it and I was like, should I play this now? It just felt early. Yeah. And I was like, it just makes sense. And it was crippling. Oh, yeah. For you. Yeah. And it was just because I got very fortunate in drawing that really great combo that was hard for you to answer. Yeah. That can be frustrating.
Yeah, that was actually my con as well. And I actually wasn't even thinking about that aspect. I feel like these games, you should allow for a random stroke of luck. And we talked a lot about how well balanced this game is. I think those are the incidents, you know, when you get those sort of lucky or unlucky card draws that kind of tip it out of balance a little bit. So for example, in the follow-up game, I was playing as the Culty Gang.
You were Culty Gang, yeah.
And the Culty Gang has a bunch of 1 guns and a bunch of 2 guns and a bunch of 3 guns. We didn't talk about this, but when you kill certain gang members, they have certain side effects. Yes. And so one of them, for example, this was like the most brutal one. I was getting bad cards at the beginning. I was getting all these 1s, and I wasn't able to outweigh the cards that you were putting down. And by the time that I actually started getting the better ones, I think the 45 Peacemaker, the guy that triggers those becoming obsolete had already died. Yep. And so it was just bad circumstance after bad circumstance.
You finally started drawing that good pistol, and the guy you have to have in your gang in order to play it, I had already killed. Right. And so now that's a dead card in your hand.
They were just free discards. So it was just a stinky card draw. Now, I feel like when that happens, you should just play the game again.
I
right?
agree.
It's just a shuffle.
Yeah.
You know, if the difference between you liking or not liking a game is a shuffle, you're probably in the wrong hobby.
I totally agree. And that's why I say I consider it more of a risk and not a con. And this kind of leads into one of my other cons, I guess.
Okay.
This will make sense in a minute. And I'm saying con a lot. This game reminded me a lot of Magic the Gathering. And this sort of thing can happen to you in Magic the Gathering. And obviously, there are millions of people who don't give a crap about that, right?
Yep.
If you played Magic, I think we've all experienced that, where your opponent just draws that beautiful combination. You know,
You just get your synergy right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
Yeah.
And you're drawing a bunch of expensive stuff that you can't get down on the table yet.
Right.
Right?
Or you're like a multicolored deck and you only draw one color of land.
Right.
You're just like, dang it, come on.
It's not common, but it can happen. And I think with this game, you just need to expect it's a very similar thing.
Yeah.
Like, the decks are balanced. Most games are going to feel balanced, but there is a risk that you're just going to draw poorly.
Right.
And I will say in Magic, you know, you can mulligan your hand, and that does not exist in this game.
Right.
So if you draw crappily at the start, you could be in for a painful experience. But again, it's a quick play.
I was going to say, and that's the other counterweight, right? Is like, okay, play again.
Right.
It's not that long of a game. It took us a little bit to get going, but once you kind of understand how the game plays and all of that, I think you can knock out a couple games like pretty quickly.
Yeah. And just piggybacking off this thought, like I said, it feels a lot like Magic, and I think, again, that's one potential con for the game, is this game will feel very familiar to you. When I played this did not introduce anything new or revolutionary.
Right.
It felt a lot like Magic, and it also, to me, felt a lot like a game called San Juan. Have you played San Juan?
I know I have, but I cannot for the life of me remember how.
So San Juan has that same thing going on, where you have your hand of cards, and in order to play some of the cards in your hand, you have to discard others out of your hand to pay the cost to play it to the table. This game is Magic and San Juan.
Okay.
It is.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it is. It just so happens I really enjoy San Juan and Magic, so if that combination sounds appealing to you, you might enjoy it. But I guess what I'm saying is you're not going to find anything new here.
Sure.
Okay?
Cool. Would you want to move on to final thoughts then?
Yeah, I think so. All right. So as I mentioned, this game reminds me a lot of Magic and San Juan, and I really enjoy both of those games quite a bit. Do I wish that this game introduced some new mechanisms that I hadn't seen before? Yes. And I will say that if this game was all that there was, I would probably give this game a 3. Because I think after a while, playing the same game with the Colty Gang and the McCready decks over and over again, it might feel stale. But this game is flush with expansions.
Okay.
Which we didn't even really get into all of those.
Sure.
But I think given how much I did enjoy the gameplay here, and knowing that I can play with new cards and new decks and wanting to explore those and keeping it fresh and exciting, I'm going to give this game a 4. I think the expansions save it from being an experience that might get tired and stale to one that will stay fresh and interesting. I'm going to keep this game. I enjoyed it. I think it's a solid 4.
Cool. Very good. Well, I liked Revolver. Games are generally short once you know how to play. Your turns are simple. And that goes well for a game that you can't feel like you've really played until you've tried with both sides. The opposite factions play very differently from each other. You have to put your mind in a different space in order to perform well as one party or the other. I think it would be boring if that were not the case for an asymmetrical game.
Agreed.
So I'm going to give Revolver a 4 as well.
Awesome.
I like what you said about expansions, because I think that actually does kind of accord with how Magic works too, right? If there were only two Magic decks, you would feel bored after a few plays. Yep. But there's not. There's millions of Magic cards. I mean, at least a large number of thousands, right?
Right.
Not only are there more cards, there's more types. Half the game is building your deck. And so maybe you can't do that in this one, but it's nice to know that there are more options and combinations out there that could make this game interesting play after play.
Totally agree. We're certainly not implying that this game has the legs of Magic.
Oh, heck no, yeah.
Not even close. But there's a lot more to be explored here.
Yeah.
And I'm actually interested and would enjoy diving deeper into it and playing some of these expansions with you. We didn't get to, but just knowing they exist and there are numerous, I think really adds life to this game.
Yeah, we'll have to get into those sometime.
Let's do it.
Well, for those that are interested in checking out Revolver, where could we find Revolver?
Yeah, so I've got some good news on Revolver. So being as old as it is, like I said, back in 2011 this game came out. This game is in stock at Noble Night.
There we go.
Again, yeah, they've got several they got several copies in stock if you want to pick it up there. And there are also 26 copies on BGG as well. So readily available if you're into these kind of games. Check it out.
Beware, it does come in a tin.
It does come in a 10.
But there's a lot of expansion, so maybe you can forgive it for that.
They all fit in the 10.
There you go. All right, well, those are our thoughts on Revolver.
It is the era of nuclear war. Countries stockpiling global thermonuclear warheads have entrusted their nukes to supercomputers. Two such computers, Deep Red and BLU-9000, have had their launch sequences initiated. Fearing mutually assured destruction, the computers race to hack one another so they can launch unimpeded and destroy their enemy. Goal: destroy the enemy supercomputer by sending attacks through a series of connecting circuits while defending yourself from their attacks. Score 4 times for victory.
Thank you, Fred from Mac.
All right. Resistor, published in 2015 by Level 99 Games. So this is the first time we featured a game from Level 99 on this show. So they have some notable designs. BattleCon, Devastation of Endines. I don't think you've played that one, probably. It's a 2-player battling card game. Millennium Blades, which I think you would love, actually. Okay. We probably won't ever feature Millennium Blades on this show because I think it's a little bit too well known. Mm-hmm. But basically, it's a game about constructing your decks for battling card games like Magic. So, like, there are places where you can buy packs of cards that you add to your deck to construct a deck to compete against people in battles, like you would be buying booster packs of Magic at a game store.
It sounds very meta.
It's very meta. Yes, it's very meta. But I know how much you used to be into that kind of thing, that I think you would really like it. Okay. But we would never feature it on this show, I don't think. So yeah, Level 99 Games. Resistor, however, the game we're talking about today, at the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 5,712. The designer of this game is Anthony Amato. This designer has no other significant notable designs other than Resistor. Okay. All right, so brief rule summary of Resistor. As the computer mentioned at the start of the review, what you're doing in this game is you're taking on the role of a supercomputer controlling nuclear warheads. You've got a blue color and you've got a red color. Each player has a mainframe or a base, and in between each of those mainframes is a display of cards. 7 cards, to be exact, that are lined up next to each other, long edge to long edge. So you've got your mainframe, a run of 7 cards, and then you've got your opponent's mainframe. Now let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a card. Every card is double-sided, and on each side you've got a variable number of blue or red wires that are running across the card. Bear with me here, this is a little bit hard to explain. You might have a single red wire running directly across the card, or it could run diagonally across the card, or you could have 2 red wires running in parallel across the card. Now, you can also have the other color on the card as well. You can have a blue wire running across and then 2 red wires. Any combination, but basically they can either go straight across or they can go diagonally. And when you lay these cards out in a line, these wires are going to hook up to each other. I hope that makes sense. So the way you score points in this game is if you're able to get running all the way across all of the cards, a wire of your color connecting from your mainframe all the way into your opponent's mainframe, uninterrupted. If you get that line running all the way across and hooking into them, that will cause them to raise a level in their DEFCON level. So they'll go from level 1 to level 2. If you're able to raise your opponent to DEFCON level 5 before they raise you to DEFCON level 5, you've successfully won the game. Now, how is the game played? On your turn, you're going to take 3 actions. You have to take each one time. First action is the switch out. So you can pull a card out of the line and replace it with a card either in your hand or a card that's in your opponent's hand to try to establish those connections. Like I said, you can also use your opponent's card, and that's because you can see what's on the back of their card, but they don't know what's on the back of their card. The second action is the flip over. So when you do this, you take a card that's already in the line and you mirror image, flip it over to its opposite side. When you do this, you're trying to establish meaningful connections for yourself to score points. And then the third and final action is you can draw a card and trash a card. So you draw a card and you either add it to your hand or your opponent's hand, and then you take a card out and you throw it away. If that card has a resistor on it, your opponent gets to do 1 flip over action as well. So what is a resistor? Well, on some of the cards, there is a white diamond that is a resistor. If you are able to play a card into the line that has a resistor on it, or flip a card over that has a resistor on it, and from that resistor connecting back into your mainframe, you have a wire of your color, you lower your DEFCON level by a step, which is nice. Each color line connected to that resistor, regardless of whether it hooks into a mainframe or not, all of those cards will flip over. You're resetting the circuit. Then that card is thrown out, and then the line is brought together. So now instead of 7 cards between your opponent, you have 6 cards. Every time a resistor is revealed, the line will continually shorten, so you'll get closer to your opponent. Mm-hmm. Players will take turns going back and forth doing those 3 actions until one player is raised to DEFCON level 5. They'll lose, and the other person wins the game. That's generally how you play Resistor. This is an unusual game. Mm-hmm. So I posed this question when we reviewed Medina by Steph and Dora, and I would ask it here as well. How would you describe this game to somebody? What kind of game is this? It's very unique for sure, but if you were explaining it to somebody like, yeah, this is a worker placement, or this is a drafting game, this is area control, what kind of game is this?
Yeah, so I feel like at the very least, the central element of this game is memory.
Bingo.
You'll do poorly if you don't make an effort to remember what cards are out there, what the back sides of cards are, right? Because cards are going to flip, and they were facing up, now they're facing down. Or your opponent is placing cards out, but you were able to see the back of it, and now it's facing down. Keeping track of that is a crucial element of this game.
It really is. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I totally agree with you. This is a game of memorization. If you were able to perfectly remember everything you have seen in this game, based on what's on the other side of the cards and remembering that when they get flipped over, or when cards are played down, remembering what was on the back side of those. If you were able to perfectly remember that, your turn would actually be pretty simple. There wouldn't be a lot to think about.
Yeah.
But the turns aren't necessarily quick and simple in this game because you're struggling to try to remember what the heck was on the back side of that card. And even if you kind of remember, what's tricky about it is because of the way that the cards flip over. They flip over in a mirror image way. So once a card's been flipped, when you're thinking about flipping it back over again, you're trying to remember, I think I remember what kind of wires are on here, but if I flip it back over, will it connect things back the way that I want them to be connected?
Yeah.
Right? It's tricky and challenging for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned playing cards from other people's hands. There's kind of this Kanabi element to this game, right?
For
where
sure.
You're incentivized to pay attention to what's on the backside of the person across from you's hand.
Definitely.
Of course, I love Hanabi, and I thought that it was interesting because it not only gives you more options, right? You only have 2 cards in your hand. It can be a defensive move.
Yeah, we want to make sure we're clear because this is a hard game to explain.
Yeah, it's very visual.
It is. When your opponent plays a card from their hand to the table, they're playing face up the side that they can see.
Right.
So when the card goes down, you just saw what went face down.
So now you have perfect knowledge, if your memory was perfect, of that card.
You know what's on the back side of that, whereas they don't. And if the resistor's back there, you can try to hook into that card and then flip it to drop a DEFCON level. That's fun, right? Again, the challenge is, can you remember how it hooks up? Yeah, it's tricky for sure.
I did think that whole pulling a card out of someone else's hand was fairly thematic too, because as I was thinking through, I was like, oh, that's kind of like the whole hacking elements, right? Like the supercomputers hacking into the enemy, getting some information that they don't have and using it for your advantages. So I always love picking up on stuff like that.
Totally agree. One other thing I really enjoyed about this game, too, was how the resistors worked. The fact that you could use a resistor to lower your DEFCON level is useful, and it could be fun in that way. But I think the biggest strength of the resistors is the fact that it shortens the board.
Yeah.
If the resistors weren't in the game and they didn't serve that function, this game could last too long.
Yeah.
And because the board shortens, the game ends up being at a perfect length. It's usually around 20 minutes. And it also incorporates tension. Because as you get closer to your opponent, it becomes easier to plug into them.
Yeah.
But it also becomes easier for them to plug into you.
Right.
Not to mention, and I didn't mention this in the rules because I was going to save it for right here, if you are able to get 2 perfectly parallel lines to run from your mainframe into your opponent, they go up 2 DEFCON levels. That is nearly impossible when the board is 7 cards long.
Right.
However, if the board between you is only 3 cards, it's very possible.
Yeah.
And in fact, In the last game we played, Cameron was very close to doing...
I think it was 1 card away.
1 card away, and you would have won had you been able to do
yeah.
it. Yeah. So I like that tension that adds.
Yeah. I also thought the mechanic of being able to play a resistor and the fact that it flips the cards over, whichever lines connect to it, was a good thing too, because it kind of gave you a chance to shake things up.
Yes.
We didn't see any resistors the first time that we played this game, and
which was weird.
It was weird, and we felt like we were definitely lacking something, particularly because you just smoked me. I think once we got down to 4 or 5 cards, you managed to connect to me, and I just couldn't switch it up enough with the actions that I had to get you out of my way. There was a couple cards that you just were like, okay, well, just flip that one again. That's good for me, and then I'll place this one here, and you were able to connect with me like every turn just about. So getting those resistors out on the table can also shake things up and make it more of a game again if someone makes that initial connection.
It's critical. And this was actually one of my cons, because for the reason you just mentioned, if somebody connects to you and they really get their hooks in you, so to speak, with a connection, it can just be nearly impossible to shake them off. And if those resistors are not coming up for you, it's over for you, right? You just can't disconnect them. And that can be frustrating because it does seem like they weren't coming up as much as I would like for them to.
Sure.
As you mentioned, in the first game, it never happened once, which I think is an anomaly. I don't think that that's normal, but I do feel like that there were times where it just seemed like it would have been nice to be drawing them, and they just weren't coming up.
Yeah. And that leads to a little bit one of my cons. I guess we're sort of tipping into the con part now.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit of randomness in this game. You can't anticipate what card is coming up because it's in the little card box stack. You also don't know what's on the back of the cards that you're drawing. And randomness is just so hard to account for. And the other aspect of this, when you think about memory games, they can definitely be fun. One of the problems that I think this game has with the memory aspect of it is the sheer number of possible permutations that you can have with this. Each card, if you think about it, has 2 sides, and each of those sides can be played in 2 different rotations. Right? So just each card, there's 4 different possible permutations. When you multiply it out by however many cards are on the table, plus however many cards are in the other person's hand, there is a lot of information to try to wrap your brain around this game. I struggled with that a little bit. I felt overwhelmed a lot of the time.
I agree with you, and I'm really glad you mentioned the randomness too. This was my biggest con as well. I really, really, really disliked the draw and trash. That when you trashed a card that has a resistor on it, which you can't see, it's totally random. There might be some situations where you're holding a card and you know what's on both sides of it, but often when you're trashing, you know only what's on one side. And you trash that resistor and your opponent gets to do a free flip over. That's just a killer.
Can be, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound like that's a big deal. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it's just random.
If they know what card they would flip because they were able to memorize, like, that card's good for me.
Right.
And they don't have to use their flip on their turn to do that. That's a huge advantage.
Yep. And that's what I was talking about. You've lost tempo. There's a term in chess called tempo, actually, where you're losing time. In this game, tempo really matters because if they gain a tempo on you by flipping over a card that they know helps them, now they don't have to do that on their turn. They can flip over another one.
Yeah.
And you're getting farther behind.
Yep.
And it's just because of luck, right? It was just lucky.
Do you want to move on to final thoughts then?
I'm ready.
All right. I can start on this one.
Okay, cool.
So I didn't really love this game. I feel like the permutations that were possible and the things that the game is asking you to remember is just too many. I think it had a good pace, but it just wasn't my favorite. I didn't feel very connected with the theme of the game. It felt a little bit mechanical to some degree, and I don't know. It just didn't go very deep for me. So I'm going to give it a 3. Didn't hate it. I definitely don't think it's a bad game. I think there are probably people out there that would really enjoy this game, really connect with it more than I did. Yeah. But it was just kind of a meh for me.
Yeah, this game was so close to being a good game. It was almost there. The memory puzzle, I enjoyed it at times. It was fun to try to remember how the cards hooked up. If I flip this over, is this good? It was good in that regard. But I think for me, the random elements that we just talked about, not being able to draw resistors when you need to get unhooked to somebody, trashing resistors and the opponent getting to flip over, just took away too much from this game for it to really be one that I would look to come back to and play. After we had played it a few times, I just really had no desire to come back to it. It was just totally forgettable, honestly. Which honestly, that's just the definition of a meh, right?
Right.
So again, for me, it was a 3. Once we had played this one a few times, I just had no desire to come back to
same.
it. Just
I was
didn't-
glad when we finished our last game.
Yeah.
I was just like, cool. I just don't want to play this anymore.
It wasn't like offensive. I wasn't upset about it like Niagara. You know what I mean? But I was just like, okay. You know, it was a game on a pile of games.
Sure.
Move on.
Okay. Well, as we always do, we always want to invite folks to check us out and tell us if they think that we're wrong about it. So if folks want to give Resistor a try, where could they go to find it?
Guess what?
Noble Knight?
Guess who carries Resistor? Noble Knight.
There you go.
They have it if you want to give it a try at really reasonable prices, and then 8 copies on BGG as well. I actually went and looked on Level 99's website because they sell games directly on their site, and they don't even have it in stock anymore.
That might tell you something.
But yeah, I know, right? But Noble Knight does. So if you want to give it a go, it's available there to you. It's a short game. I mean, if you like memory type games, you could like this one. But for us, it had good features. It's just not what we're looking for.
Sure.
All right, those are our thoughts on Resistor.
The time has come for the final confrontation between the Fellowship and Sauron in Middle-earth. Will the hobbit Frodo and his companions bring the One Ring to Mount Doom deep in the land of Mordor? Or will they fall to the forces of the Dark Lord Sauron and lose Middle-earth to eternal darkness? Only one side can win.
This game stands on the edge of a knife.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's almost time to start an annual rewatch
For real.
the movies.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about doing that with the younger two.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Have they not seen them yet?
Knox has seen parts of it. Hayes is not.
Okay.
Yet. You know, he's 8.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff in Two Towers can get a little bit scary. You know,
a lot of
with,
violence and stuff.
Yeah. Well, not even that. I mean,
Legolas
he doesn't mind violence.
stabbing
really,
people. Well, that's true. They do
think
video games.
Some of the goblins and some of the Uruk-hai, especially when they're like digging them out of the ground,
Yeah.
you know, can be a little bit, whoa, you know,
Yeah.
for small kids. But I think we're there.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, for something a little bit different in this episode, your boy is going to teach a game.
It's time, buddy.
Let's go.
If I'm going to read flavor text, you're going to teach a game. It's
There we
happening
go.
today.
And we'll get to that flavor text eventually.
I've read flavor text.
You did?
When you were gone.
Which one did you read?
Remember, I did it for Macho, which I absolutely
Oh,
destroyed.
that's right. That's right. Sorry. That episode just got totally eclipsed by Jason's dramatic and awesome reading of the pirate voice.
I did it for Atten, too. Yeah, I mean,
right.
Jason had better material than us.
That's true.
Okay?
That's true.
What are you going to do with Atten and Macho?
All right. Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation.
Yes.
Published in 2002 by Fantasy Flight Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 548.
What?
Now, yeah, we have to make a note about that because typically that doesn't fall into our criteria for this podcast. It's obviously the highest rated game that we've ever reviewed.
Yeah.
And that's because this game falls squarely into the forgotten category.
Definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. Nobody talks about this game anymore. When I first got into the hobby about 10 years ago, there were rumblings about it here and there, but at that point, it was pretty old because that was around 2012. This game came out in 2002, okay? This game's been around a long time.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anybody talk about this game in 8 years easy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just been a while. But we decided to cover it because we feel like it's worthy, and it was recommended by a guild member.
Okay.
So on our guild, we have a post called Gem Miners Wanted, where we take recommendations from the community, and we're trying to incorporate more of those into our show as we move forward. And this game was actually recommended by Daniel Wallen of The Game Table. So Daniel, I guess you could consider him a board game influencer. Okay. He's on Instagram.
Cool.
And he has 21,000 followers on Instagram.
Wow.
Just to give you an idea, we're around 1,200. Okay. So 21,000 followers, and he actually specializes in 2-player games.
Okay, wow.
Super nice guy. Really like his content. He's in our guild. He recommended, hey, you might want to check out Lord of the Rings Confrontation. I had it. I was like, it's pretty high in the rankings, but nobody talks about this game anymore. So I was like,
we'll talk about it.
Let's give it a go.
Let's go.
And one more thing. This is a little bit of an aside, but I want to do it because I want to make sure these guys get the credit. Cavum, which we reviewed a few episodes ago, we forgot to mention that was a guild member recommendation as well.
Okay.
So Ghidorah, our guild manager, and Snoozefest, who we mentioned on here before, Ravindra Prasad, recommended Cavum to us. So we appreciate the recommendation there. Thanks, Daniel, for this one, and we'll try to do a better job of remembering those every time they come up.
It's so fun to realize that as much as we are fueled by our own interest in this, that actually this has become a community effort in real life, which is really fun.
Yeah, and I have a huge Word document of potential episode titles and games, and next to those games, in parentheses, the guild members who recommended them. So they're coming.
Yeah, very cool.
I'm just trying to compile that list.
All right, moving along. It was designed by Reiner Knizia,
yes,
whom you know we've talked about before. If you're interested in listening to us talk a little bit more about Reiner Knizia and some of his games, you can go check out episode 3 of this podcast.
Yep.
All right, brief rules summary. Let's see how this goes.
You look so nervous right now.
Oh, man, I'm so nervous. I'm going to have a sip of this.
The power of editing, my friend. Make you sound like a genius. You got this.
All right. In Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation, 2 players will play as either the forces of Sauron or the Fellowship. Each of these factions has different objectives to win the game. If you're playing as Sauron, your objectives are to get 3 of your characters in the Shire or to kill Frodo. If you are playing as the Fellowship, your goal is to get Frodo to set foot in Mordor.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the board. The board, kind of uniquely, takes on a diamond shape.
Very unique, yeah.
So each player has a tip of this diamond pointed at them, and that will represent your home base. If you're playing as Sauron, the tip of your diamond is Mordor. If you're playing as the Fellowship, the tip of your diamond is the Shire. From there are a number of territories that kind of stair-step out 2, 3, and so on toward the middle of the board. And those represent different regions of Middle-earth that your characters are in throughout the course of the game. So each player also has a number of character placards, and these are little rectangular stand-up guys that will have on the side facing you an image of the character and a number that represents that character's battle strength. Mm-hmm. On the opposite side is a color that represents your team, so the character is hidden from your opponent. Mm-hmm. They can't tell who is who, they just see your 9 different tiles. So if you're familiar with Stratego, you have a similarity there with hidden information and so forth.
Yep. You can see your forces, but your opponent does not know who those people are until they're revealed to them in battle. Very similar to Stratego in that way.
So how do you take your turn in Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation? So on your turn, you literally choose a character and move it forward 1 space.
That's it?
That's it. Other things might happen depending on where you move, whether there's other characters in that space and so forth. But that's it. You make 1 decision. So what happens if you move your character into a space that contains a character belonging to the opposing team? So if that happens, a battle occurs. So to resolve a battle between characters, first you reveal the hidden information. Yep. So everybody knows who's playing against whom.
Yep.
And the first thing you do is you resolve character abilities. So each character in the game on either side will have a special ability associated with that character. And these abilities happen at the beginning of the battle. And I believe the Fellowship character ability will happen first, followed by Sauron's character ability. And depending on what the ability of that character does, the battle may be resolved. So for example, Pippin from the Fellowship is able to retreat from battle backward toward the player. If that happens, then the battle is over and nothing else takes place. However, if the abilities are resolved and the battle is still going to go forth, characters will choose a card from their deck, and then those cards will be revealed simultaneously. The cards in your deck will consist of either text cards or strength cards. The strength cards will be represented by a number. So text cards will be resolved first. I won't go through what all of those are, but some of them could basically just end the battle. However, if the battle continues, then the number on power cards are then added to the numbers on the character tiles.
Yep.
And the character with the lower total is killed. And then the other character remains in that region and the battle is over. The cards used in the battle are then discarded off to the side, face up, in public view of both players for the rest of the game. So you can count cards in this game because it's easy to know what your opponent's deck consists of because each player is equipped with a player aid describing the character's abilities and the cards contained in the opponent's deck.
Yep. Decks are very small. It's easy to know what they're left with.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's basically it.
Yeah.
Rounds continue until one of the win conditions are met, depending on which team you're playing as.
Yep.
And that's how you play Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation. I did it.
You did it?
I taught a game, guys.
That was pretty good. I'll never forget. I have to tell this story. So, way long time ago, Cameron wanted to play Agricola.
It's fine. Publicly shame me.
Cameron had been playing Agricola a ton on the app, and he was really good at Agricola. But you know, the app does a lot for you, right? So the computer will do a lot of housekeeping stuff that...
Setting up the game board, for example.
Yeah. And this was years ago. At this point, I had never played Agricola.
That's probably 2014, 2015.
Yeah, it's been a while, right? He's like, yeah, let's play Agricola. I was like, yeah, I've been wanting to play this. And we had set it up, and Cameron just staring at the board like, I don't know how to teach this. You've played this several times. He's like, and he was looking through the rule books. It was a disaster.
Well, because as well, if anyone out there has played Agricola, there's like 40,000 cards in that game.
It really is. Yeah. But we still give him a hard time about that to this day. But yeah, I'm done, man. You did a good job.
I'm game teaching shy.
You did a better job than Ben does.
Yeah.
Should be happy about that.
So for this game, you and I both, I know, love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So when you approach a game like this, where an intellectual property that you love is the central theme of the game, how do you tend to feel as you approach games like that? Like, I know you love comics and Marvel and so forth. How did you feel about this one before playing it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, a good point to lead off with is, whenever you are really invested in an intellectual property and they make a game on it, the stakes are much higher for you, right? Because your expectations are high.
Yeah.
Right? We love Lord of the Rings. We know Lord of the Rings. We expect great things from it because it's such an amazing property.
Yeah.
And so...
Amazon's coming out with some Lord of the Rings related TV show, and I know that, like me, every other Lord of the Rings fan is like, squinty eyes emoji.
Right.
Like, all right, we'll see.
Don't
blow this.
You're inherently a little distrustful, right? Because you want it to be done right. And I'm happy to say that Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation nailed the theme here.
Yeah.
It really did. Reiner Knizia did a masterful job at designing this game. I feel like a lot of modern games, and I'm not saying this is necessarily bad, I'm just making a point here, okay? Is that a lot of games, it seems like to me, the designer comes up with a mechanism and then puts a theme on it, right? It starts with the mechanism or the design, and then they put a theme on it, and that's where pasted on theme comes from, right? Because you can see it, you feel it, right?
Yeah.
You're like, this theme could be anything. I'm not necessarily against that. I'm just making a point. This game can only be Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And nothing else. Just because of how those character abilities work.
Yeah.
And how closely they're tied to how the character is in the literature. It couldn't be anything else.
It wouldn't make sense. Yeah.
Reiner Knizia took Lord of the Rings and built a game around it.
Yes.
He didn't take mechanisms and put Lord of the Rings on it. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
Because I just don't see how it could be any other way. Every character ability, you read it and you're like, oh, that makes total sense because of this, right? Like Boromir.
Yeah.
Boromir, his ability is that when he gets in a battle with somebody, he dies.
Yeah.
But the person he's fighting also dies. But it makes total sense. Boromir is supposed to die.
Yeah.
But he
doesn't make it to the end.
He's not going to make it to the end. But he takes down somebody with him.
Right.
We're not going to go through... I mean, we can cover some more. We won't cover them all, but that's what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. He just nailed that. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just been blown away how tightly the rules, the board, the mechanics of the game is so tightly knit. It's almost mind-blowing. I mean, we talk about the board, like down to the pass of Caradhras on the map.
I'm glad you mentioned
as a region. But there's also this line that runs through it that only the Fellowship can use.
You can bypass
Caradhras through the
yeah.
mines of Moria. And then similarly, there are other lines that only the Fellowship can use to take the River Anduin and move in what is otherwise an illegal way on the map. It's narrative-driven game mechanics.
Yep.
it's just really cool. I mean, I feel like I could just do this all day
I
long,
know.
right?
We could go on
Talking
on
about
this,
the Mines of Moria.
Yeah.
What can Sauron do about the Mines of Moria? That's getting to move 2 spaces for free, right? Passing right through it into the other side. Well, Sauron can place the Balrog into Caradhras area, and if he's there, and remember, this is hidden, and the Fellowship tries to use the pass of the Mines of Moria, and the Balrog's there, that character dies instantly.
And it's push your luck, right? Because remember, that character is facing away from you, so
you don't know.
It could be the Balrog, or he could be putting somebody on there making you think it's the Balrog,
right?
But it's not really the Balrog. But when it is the Balrog, it's so cool because I didn't pass through the mines, but I had wondered if it was the Balrog. And Cameron and I, in one of our games, had a battle where Gandalf fought the Balrog on Caradhras, and we both died.
Yeah,
and we were just geeking out about it because you're like, this is just like the movie. You know, it was just stuff like that just kept happening.
Yeah,
theme home run, just crushed this one
absolutely
out of the park. Great. I will say one more thing, because I think it deserves to be said. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty sure you've not played War of the Ring.
I haven't.
War of the Ring is an awesome game. I've played it several times. It's great. I'll just go ahead and say, I think it's better than this game. I don't think that's spoiling my review for this game, but War of the Ring is one of the best games ever made.
Wow.
It feels like Lord of the Rings. No doubt about it. But the thing about War of the Ring is you have to make a day of it.
Okay.
It's like 4 or 5 hours, okay?
Wow.
Like, it's something you have to plan for. You
kinda
and I
like
are going to
reading
get
the Lord of the
together on
Rings
Saturday
books.
to play War of the Ring.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's kind of like reading the Lord of the Rings
exactly,
books. It's a
right?
commitment.
It's a commitment. It's not a casual game.
It's worth it, but it's a commitment.
I will make a bold claim here and say that while I don't think this game is as good as that one, it evokes the same feelings of playing Lord of the Rings in a much, much, much shorter playtime.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation is War of the Ring Express.
Okay.
Or War of the Ring Light, if you will. Obviously, there are a lot of differences, but not really. War of the Ring is area control. This, in a way, is kind of area control. You're fighting over territories. War of the Ring has text on cards. Now, these cards have a lot of text, and they tell a story. But these cards also have text. It's just a sentence.
Yep.
It's just Lord of the Rings condensed into a much more manageable chunk. Mm-hmm. Whereas War of the Ring is a huge experience, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking for War of the Ring in a shorter period of time, is what I'm saying, the Confrontation does it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think as well, we have to mention just typical Knizia simplicity, right? As I described in the rules, you move a guy.
How does this guy do it?
You move a guy, you play a card. You do what it says, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And yet, how many times were we sitting here and I was like, dude, I'm sorry I'm taking such a long time. You're like, no, it's fine, man. I get it. Because it's not obvious how to play this game. And once again, we talked about asymmetry, right?
Yep.
You do have to shift your brain. Like, if you've played as Sauron, you can't play the same way as the Fellowship. You just can't. Their abilities are different. You've got to account for that. You've got to account for the movement. You've got to account for what the other team is capable of doing. You know, and for that matter, we made comparisons to things like chess, which I think was intentional, right?
Yeah.
There are characters in this game that have special movement abilities. Usually you can't attack sideways. Aragorn can. You normally can only move forward one. The riders can move forward as many as they need.
Yep.
The Nazgul can
fly
fly
wherever he
across the
wants.
whole map.
Yeah.
Just cool the way that it's similar but not the same as things like chess.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you pointed out the simple rules. Again, Knizia master this. Literally, move a piece. That's your turn.
And yet it's such a hard game.
But there, yes, because you can see all the ways it can go wrong.
Right.
And there's so many opportunities for clever play. There are several. I'm going to outline a couple that I think are really interesting. So when you're in a battle, remember you can see the discards. You can see what an opponent has. So you can math it out. Let's say that I'm able to figure out, okay, Cameron has no card in his hand that can beat me. And I know that. Mathematically, I can play a higher strength card. He can't win. But now you start to have an interesting decision. Okay, Cameron knows that he can't win. I know that Cameron can't win. And those high value strength cards are precious.
Yes.
Because once they're gone, you're missing them later. Because you're likely not going to see him again. So now you start thinking, well, Cameron knows he can't win. I know he can't win. So he's probably going to play like a 1 or a 2. So maybe I just play a 1 and win with a low card.
Right.
But that's risky. Because if he decides to play a high card, I'll lose. But is he really going to do that? Is he really going to spend his 5
Yep.
If he knows I can just play my 5 and win, and now he's just out as 5.
Ugh.
So much clever play.
And
it's so mind-blowing.
It also evoked for me, and I know we're just on the heels of that episode, but the hoity-toity, he thinks he knows that I know that he knows that, like,
It's
that
very
sort of
much got that
tic-tac-toe
feel
type
to it.
thing.
Yeah, and that was another thing. There are a lot of abilities that are like, if Gimli moves into a space with the orcs just die.
Yeah.
So let's say Cameron moves the orcs into a space, and then I move one of my pieces in that direction. Does that mean that's Gimli? Maybe. Or maybe I'm wanting him to think that that's Gimli, but that's not actually Gimli. That's somebody else, and I'm trying to divert him in another direction, right?
Right.
All this misdirection creates for interesting gameplay decisions. Well, I think it's a really nice segue into another point I wanted to make as a pro is the game is very asymmetric. Mm-hmm. Sauron's forces are stronger than the Fellowship.
Right.
You cannot, as the Fellowship, go head-to-head on Sauron and expect to win.
Right.
You're not going to. But Knizia, being the genius that he is, accounts for this, right?
Right.
So one of Sauron's win conditions is get 3 people in the Shire, which is a lot. So what I did, I didn't win the game. I managed to make it close. But when Saruman was trouncing through my guys, I just stepped aside and let him go into the Shire. Because I can't do anything about him.
Yeah.
That brought you one step closer to victory.
Right.
But once he's in the Shire, I don't have to worry about him anymore.
Like he actually gets to in the actual story.
Right.
I just might mention.
Yeah, he's just, go ahead, have it. The point I'm making here is, if I can't go toe-to-toe with Sauron, well, how do I win? Well, I have to be nimble. Mm-hmm. When you play as the Fellowship, your maneuverability is important. And that's why a lot of the Fellowship, you can retreat. You can retreat out of battles. You can go through the Mines of Moria. You can take the River Anduin. Your movement capabilities are much enhanced. So you're not necessarily trying to overpower. You're just trying to get Frodo and Mordor.
Yep.
Right? And Frodo is slippery as heck.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't
True Hobbit fashion.
corner him, you can't kill him.
Yep.
And so it's hard, right? So that's their strength.
Yep.
It's just getting around the forces of evil and landing in Mordor. Brilliant.
Yeah. And I think finally, this game comes down to the wire. When we played, with me playing the Fellowship and you playing as Sauron, you were just crushing me. I mean, I didn't win. I don't think any battle outright. I think all of the dudes of yours that I killed, it was mutually assured destruction. We just blew each other up. But it still came down to basically 2 moves. If you hadn't...
Frodo got way too close for comfort.
Yeah,
to get
if
into
you had
Mordor.
not had that one dude in the area to where I wouldn't have been able to retreat when you attacked Frodo, who was the last character that I had, I would have won.
You would have walked in.
I would have been able to walk in.
Yeah.
Because of the way that this game is designed, and it's just so well done.
Yeah.
Should we move on to final thoughts?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'm gonna go first this time because
Okay.
there's no bones about like how I feel about this game. This is an amazing game. You just feel immersed in Lord of the Rings theme the entire game. It's the exact opposite of pasted on, and I mentioned that because I've accused Reiner Knizia of pasting on a theme before.
Yes, you did.
And
Spectacular.
I regret that.
Yeah.
All right. That's not how he
shamed
rolls.
you.
Knizia crushed it in this game. It has these feelings of chess that I mentioned that I really liked, but again, because of the theme elements, I feel I connect with it more than I ever have with chess. It's simple. I like the asymmetry in this game. I think it's extremely well balanced. There's a bit of that rock, paper, scissors, hoity-toity that I like. I just absolutely loved this game. So you guys are going to think I picked up whatever rating disease Chris has, but I'm giving Lord of the Rings The Confrontation a 6, hands down.
I knew you would.
Yeah. I couldn't hold back. 2 in a row, people. It was a long time coming, but you got the 6s out of me.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I had a strong suspicion. We try not to tell each other how we feel about games in the middle of while we're playing them. And we were just kind of gushing when we were playing this game.
The whole time.
Because it just captures it so well. So for me, I want to begin my rating by saying I don't like games like this. I think I made that clear with Hoity Toity. I know that you know that I know that you know. Rock, paper, scissors games, I do not like them. I never have. I've never found a game that I liked that does this. Until now. And I know that's because it's not all just that.
Yeah.
It comes into play, but it's not overbearing. And hoity-toity, that's all it is.
That's the game.
It's every turn, every round, every move. It's double think. I just don't like that. And I I was going to say I don't love it in this game. I don't love it as a mechanism, but the strengths of this game are enough to overcome that for me.
Right.
Unfortunately, this game could never be a 6 for me because of that.
Okay.
You know, it will never be one of the all-times for me because of that mechanism. But having said all that, I think I've made it clear that I think the game is fantastic in several other ways. Thematically, it's on target. Tactically, strategically, it's on target. Asymmetrically, it's on target. I enjoyed my plays of this. I felt like I was living it out. So for me, I was between a 4 and a 5 on this one.
Okay.
I really was. I'm still on the fence. You know, I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a strong 4.
Okay.
I've got to stick to my guns. You almost pulled me up to a 5, but I'm not going to let you do
Almost.
it. I know. It's such a great game. Again, I think from a mechanism standpoint, it's not what I'm necessarily looking for. But if somebody were like, hey, let's play Lord of the Rings Confrontation, I'd be like, yeah, let's go. I would want to play it.
No hesitation. Okay.
They just generate anxiety in me. You know what I mean? That guessing game.
Yeah.
But if I was in the mood, heck yeah, I would play it. It's fun. It's got great theme. I can totally see why it's 548 on BGG.
Sure.
It's deserving of that mark. It's a great game.
Sweet.
I'm sticking to my guns.
All right. Well, for those interested, where can people find Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation?
This is sad. This game is hard.
Really?
This game is a collector's item.
Dang, okay.
Yeah, it's on Noble Knight. So I
right.
think Noble Knight must sell games secondhand used.
Okay.
Because it lists the condition as like very good.
Right.
Normally online retailers list games in MSRP, but they did not on this one. So on Noble Knight, they're listed for $100.
Oh my goodness.
Noble Knight. Okay. On BGG, there are 2 copies, one at $60 and one at $75 with shipping, of course.
Still high.
There are 11 on eBay, anywhere from $65 up to $110.
Wow.
This is a small game.
It's just very out of print.
It's very out of print. And I looked up on BGG trying to figure out why this is. And not surprisingly, the licensing for Lord of the Rings is very expensive. And as we mentioned, this game can't ever be anything but Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Okay? So if they're going to reprint it, it has to be with the Lord of the Rings license. And that's expensive.
Yeah.
Okay? Do I think that this game can get reprinted? There are a lot of people in BGG that think it's never going to happen.
Okay.
That this is just a rare grail gem game.
Yeah.
Based on how highly it's rated and how great of a game I think it is, I think that that's just not possible. I think it's going to come back into print sometime, but it might.
Lord of the Rings needs to come back into vogue.
Yeah.
And maybe the Amazon series will help with that.
That might do it. It's in a lull for sure, but that might do it. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
and you think about it, like there aren't like video games that are being made anymore. Some of the most recent games are what is the one about the guy, The Shadow of Mordor or whatever.
Right.
I mean, great games.
Which is a cool game.
Yeah, great games. They're not making them as frequently anymore.
Yeah.
Like you said, because Lord of the Rings is kind of not as popular.
I mean, this game came out in 2002. That's when the movies started, right?
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
I mean, I'm sure it was made as a promotional.
Yep.
They were like Reiner Knizia, make a Lord of the Rings game because the movies are coming out.
Yeah. We'll sell them for $70 a pop.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I'm sure when they sold them, it was only probably like $30.
Probably.
I mean, there's not a lot to this
closer to
game. It's a
normal
few
price.
cards and some plastic pieces,
Yeah.
right? I hate it for people like Cameron or people that I think would enjoy it like Cameron because it's
hard to get a hold of, though.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation.
Yes. Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining us on this 2-player episode of Hidden Gems. If you like what we're doing here, please remember it's a huge help to us if you give us a rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on our various social media platforms. We're particularly active on Instagram. Check out the BGG Guild if you want to interact with us or share a game that you think is a hidden gem. We will look at those. We will include them in our podcast episodes eventually. And until next time, I'm your host, Cameron.
This is Chris.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Hidden Gems, number 12, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on July 18, 2021. Join us again in 2 weeks when we will be joining forces with the Dads on a Map podcast to chat about all things board games and do a joint review of the lesser-known game Portobello Market. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our Board Game Geek Guild is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Ghidorah. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Katelyn Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at @It'sKatelynNieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, Guild number 3874. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search. You gotta pay for music if you want to.
Sorry. Bryce is blowing up Discord on here, and it's...
Can you just quit it?
This is a Mac, man, and you know how I'm just... Help me, Cameron.
Once you have it open, just hit Command Q and it'll close.
Okay, there we go.
Also, I have to say, because we are still rolling and I am gonna edit part of this into the show, Chris is using a computer.
I know, I usually have paper notes here. What are you doing to me?